Hello and welcome to Dell's Gaming, and this is From the Depths Galley. And on today's main menu, we're going to have a bit of a fishy main course today. I'm going to enjoy building things today for a couple of videos, and in today's particular galley course we'll be looking at one of my favourite types of ships in From the Depths, although not necessarily that powerful, but they're fun to build. I like it because they're quite technically a little bit more difficult than just building a ship, and that is submarines. So this will be cut up into a few parts, because submarines have a different areas, and people have different ways of building them. So I'm going to go through some of the potential options, starting from simplest up to a more technically advanced ones, and break the different areas up, and eventually then do a final video where I put everything together and I build a submarine to use in the campaign. That's the aim. So to start off, what we're going to look at is, in the first video, is building a basic submarine and controlling it. Just doing the basic controls, because there is a few different ways people do this. I'm going to show ways that I personally think work okay. There is people can do this slightly different ways. This is what I know is it's easy to make a submarine up for people, and make sure you've got all the relevant controls for a submarine. Now, first thing for building a submarine, let's I'm gonna go start building a vehicle, because we're gonna need a vehicle to test on, and I haven't got one ready. So we're gonna start building a new vehicle to do all the little bits that I'm talking about on. Okay, so we have a lot. Now, first thing to think about is, what is the key part about a submarine is that it has to go underwater. Then that means you can't be too floaty, otherwise you just can't get into the water. Also, you don't want it to be too, I'm going to say, sinky. If you've got floaty, you must have sinky, because you won't be able to get back up onto the surface, or after damage it will just start saying, oh, damaged and sinking, blah, you're gonna despawn, blah. So there's, you have to balance those together to get a bit of a, I like to get a neutralish buoyancy if I can, or I actually prefer slightly sinking, but we'll go through that. Key bit for your then is what blocks you're going to be making everything out of, and what to look at. So if we just take the standard wood, you'll notice on here we have a weight and we have a relative buoyancy. So the relative buoyancy, and there's also the empty space, which will become relevant when we start putting air pumps in. So what we have to do is balance buoyancy with your basic weight. So as a simple part, wood floats because its buoyancy is higher than its weight. And if we go down some of the list, now you wouldn't use glass, I can't think of a reason to use glass, so we'll ignore it, and this is exactly the same as wood anyway. So light alloy, now a light alloy has a buoyancy almost the same as air, so it is very buoyant. So using light alloy will make something which is very floaty. What other things have we got now? So the main materials are going to be metal. Metal is has a basic not buoyant. So if we just put that one there and take away the wood, we'll notice that the metal is generally sinking, which makes it a good all round. Now you can obviously, heavy armor has a very big negative, but it's also very expensive. But yes, you could build it all out of heavy armor. You'd actually most probably have a bit of a different problem of trying to make this thing float back up again, because it is so heavy. It's going to negate any air pockets, etc., to go in there. So it's actually going to have the opposite effect. Same with lead. Now lead is a handy one we're going to find during our build for balancing a ship, because it's relatively not buoyant, relatively sinky, but it's actually quite cheap. That's a bonus, etc. Other one we'll look at a different side is rubber. Now rubber has some properties which will be good if you're wanting to make more stealthy submarines, etc. Now I'm not going to look into stealth submarines in this particular build, but it is a possibility. But you do be aware it is relatively buoyant, which means you're going to need a lot of armor or lead to counter your rubber block. Okay, so that's all your basic building materials. So we're going to basically choose metal for most of it, and what you've then got to do now, this is what shape are you going to use for your ship. And I mean, you can start with the most simple box. This is enough to a 3x3 in centre bit and some bits around the side. Obviously shape and all the rest of it will be totally up to you. Let's make sure I know which is the front, as to what you're wanting to build. Now I've done a square, well effectively a square here, and I'm going to do a long tube, very typical of the type of submarines which are you know, modern World War II sort of type of vessels. Now this doesn't mean you have to do this. You could make it more flat or spherical. Instead of going along this way, there's nothing to say you can't make this, the sides go out and make it thinner. There is advantages for that on detection. If you make the side short and thin and then broadside, you won't get spotted as easily, and the lower it is, obviously the less you'll get spotted. If you're going to be going front end onto something, on and off, then having a quite reduced frontal surface will help to not get spotted and reduce the aim of your target. So there is a couple of, in all cases, there's pluses and minuses of your shape. Does it affect the basic design of your ship? Only in that you're going to have drag and speed. So I'm just going to create a very rough box here because we don't need anything special. Now I'm going to add a couple of little bits here because I do like a bit of keel, and also that will be useful for later on. And whether you want to put a conning tower on the front on the top is totally up to you. Again, this can be useful. Let's see, what sort of shape shall we have? Let's have you don't need to have a conning tower. There's no you must have conning tower. It's just a that's not quite in the centre, is it? Let's just bring that back. See, I'm already getting OCD about the design. I like my submarines to be sort of reasonable shaped. We just have a very small conning tower actually on this. Wrong place. Now it's not going to have an air pump or anything into it. It's just going to be an area, but we'll show how this can be used. And it's also sort of, in my view, it's where I'm going to set my depth for using things like periscopes. Okay, now we got a basic layout. You're going to start filling the inside of a ship with components. Now, so at the moment, if I just let that go, and if I use the correct button, this should just start sinking. But you can see it's rolling, and that's because if I bring my menu on, the buoyancy and mass is all a bit over the place, and that's not good in my book. So what I tend to do is we'll just make it simple on this one, is I get some lead. We'll use a beam first because I know I need some, and I put that at the very bottom of the ship to basically make sure that it floats at least the correct way up. And you don't need to do this. This is totally extra to what you might need. And next, so what we've got here is something which is slightly going down, but we haven't started filling the inside of this ship. And going back to blocks, we have to be careful what we start putting inside. Obviously we'd already talked about various weights of the basic blocks, and I just wanted to say one thing, in that I had thought about to make it cheap, making a ship out of metal plates, except they're very buoyant. Because the way I guess someone's thought, well, only one side's air and one side is only a little bit of metal, but that'd only be buoyant if that was an air pocket. What if I put the air side on the water side? This metal plate would be very unbuoyant. So, and this is also reflected in various items. Let's go through missiles as an example. Well, look, controller is quite buoyant. So are the connectors. Medium missile. Actually, that's negative or very neutral. So that's good on those bits. Front hatch, so that's okay. But the controllers, connectors and controllers are very buoyant. So as you can see, going through, some parts are going to be neutral or negative, and some parts, like that thruster as an example, ejector, is very buoyant. So as we start adding in the center bits into the center, we're going to need to allow for this in all the different areas. Batteries, very negative, they can be used as ballast. That is very handy. Where else have we got? Fuel engines. I haven't checked fuel engines. Well, they seem to be all fairly negative, which is good. What else might be used? AI components, mainframe and connectors and everything, all very buoyant. So okay, the next thing I would do is, before I worry about controlling the ship or doing anything else, is I would fill in the center of the ship to get it working. Now, because that's not necessarily relevant to this particular video, I'll go over that quickly, get that built, and be back to you in a couple of seconds. So we've now got a basic sort of hull. Yes, the shape is terrible. I'm not here about the shape. It's just going to be showing you can make anything really work as a sub. It's sinky as it's coming down, so that's not maybe good in this first instance. But we've got everything we need in there. We've got a mainframe. We've got some missiles, some resources, and a little electric engine. But we might want to put an air pump inside. Now, for me, one of the things with an air pump is, as a player, we don't have a problem. But basically, you would want to breathe. So we put the air pump in, and at as much as anything, just make sure that we can use that to go up. So with an air pump, do we go up? And yes, we are. So we're going to be surfacing at some point here. There we go. And also we can just check, are we going to be level? Yeah, that's okay. We're not tipping over. So first part of control is going to be obviously making us go forward, which is going to be simply putting some propellers, or you could create steam propellers, any type. I'm just going to use a couple of circular propellers on the back here, just to make myself go forward, and then give to set up the AI very quickly. And this is also another main decision you've got. under maneuver, I simply use the ship. Now you could use hover, airplane, 6-axis. There's a number of different ways, or even breadboards. I'm going for a simple way that works pretty damn simply. So we add the ship. You can put all your differences. Now the key bit here is the allow hover and pitch controls, and set your ideal angle at 0. That's one of the main qualifications you want to make this work as a sub. Just gonna leave it like that for the moment, not add anything else in, and just give myself a little simple patrol route. Where are we? There we are. It thinks we're a aircraft, so we change that to a ship. Go up. Let's come on up here. I'm just going to give myself a simple patrol route so that it will try to make myself go forwards. So we can see already that it's going forwards, but we've got somewhat of a porpoising. Some of that is because most probably I have not put the... Did I put them level? Yeah, okay, they are level with the height and buoyancy, but they're trying to push me down. I may actually like to have them slightly below, so there we go. Now if what we're seeing is it's going to be pushing slightly nose up. This is all about drag, but also you see the power line, where is it in relation to the mass? If it's too far up, it's going to be forcing you down. If it's too far down, it's going to be forcing you, sorry, if it's too far up, it will force you down. If it's too far down, it will be forcing you up. And you can see we're porpoising all over the place at this moment, which is not necessarily good. Now one thing you can do is just on the extra where are we? This one hasn't got it. Okay, I'm going to take this power down to 1 for the moment. So under extra configuration, what you can do is change the pitch angle. So if I change the pitch angle, you can see it's actually a pitch angle of 2 seems to be good. So with the pitch angle of 2, it's now going just about through the centre of mass. And you'll notice also with reducing the speed a little bit, we're going fairly level. So that's a good starting point. Next we obviously we want to actually make this dive down. So first of all, we're going to look at the simple way of doing this. So our basic configuration is, with nothing else changed, we're going to float. Now the other thing I need to quickly put on here is a rudder so that we can turn. Let me just put that in, and I don't want it too powerful. I think that should be okay. Right, so everything's sort of balanced at the moment. Ways to make yourself go down. This basic principle can be used in all 3 of the next types of control. And what I'm starting with is using the hydrofoil. And we're going to set up 2 types of hydrofoil. Let me get mirror line up here, that'll make it a lot easier. And in subs you tend to have dive planes and trim planes. Dive planes make you go down. Basically they're like an aileron on a plane. They make the nose point up, point down to make you go up and down. So we're going to start with that by adding in a dive plane, and what I tend to do is try to make the dive plane at the maximum height. That way it won't try and force you any higher than the top of the sea level. But you will want to make sure that it does go into the water, because you can see this is slightly floaty. If it never goes into the water, If I set this up too high, I don't know if I'm going to be able to. Okay, we'll set it there. And we want, yep, pitch up. It's getting a little unstable. Right, so that's some pitch, but at the moment they're going to be trying to set me to 0, so that's why it's pitching up all the time. So what we'll need to do is in the AI, and this is how we make it go down. A simple way that I do is just set the minimal altitude above water to a minus figure. So if we now set this to -6, we want this to go to a -6 meters, and we also want to set the max altitude all the way down to -100. Now the main bit is it will be trying to put us down to a -6. I'll give it a bit more than that. Let's make it -10. So now to make it actually react to that -10, because at the moment these are working as pitch, what we need to do is change this by strap and hover. That adds in these 3 extra levels, 3 extra adjustments. Now we want to take off pitch up, set that to 0 because we don't want it to do pitch, we want it to do hover, and we want this to be up 1, spread to neighbours, and I want to do that on the other side, otherwise this will go out of control. There we go. So now this is trying to make us go down to -10 by basically pointing the nose down. But as you can see, it's got it down there, but it's gone very nose down attitude. We're porpoising a fair bit, and we're just doing this by the fact of using the power of our drives here. If I actually give them a little bit more power, let's put their power up to 2. So you can see it's porpoising a lot, so we would need a PID, but this is being purely driven by the propellers. So you'll notice it only works by trying to point our propellers down, and our propellers are only working whilst in the water, and that's because our pitch is very negative. As you can see here, we've gone to -24. So what you'd want to do is have the pitch more neutral near the 0 line. So this is where your trim planes come in. Now your trim planes tend to go at the back, so as it's pushing the nose down, it'll also be trying to push the rear down, and when you go up, the nose will be lifted but the rear will be lifted, and that basically it sort of mimics the front planes with the rear planes. So we'll put these in, and we do want these on pitch control. And the other bit is you want to have actually slightly more trim control than you potentially have pitch. Yes, you want more trim than dive planes. Close to them. You want me slightly less. If you want it to have a slight nose down attitude, you see at the moment it's got, how many have I got there? I've got 1, 2, 3, I've got 6 there, and I've got slightly more than 6 here. So if I take a few off, so I've got 5. Now we will get a bit of pitch. So at the moment it's got a slight down attitude on average, because we're trying to get down to that -10. There we are. But we are only getting there because, and this is simply, this will work for any ship that's under power. We haven't got to do anything more. We could set this down. Now to change the altitude that you want this to go at, all I need to do is go into my mainframe and change under adjustments the altitude above water. And as you can see, the front plane, the dive planes have gone down. The pitch ones have also gone down to try and counteract the pitch, but we have got a slight. And once it gets to the new -20, obviously you can put PIDs in to adjust it, but it's gonna try and match that. Now, one thing about this particular version, it's nice and simple, but it relies on the drive at the back. If we had no power on the back, so although the dive planes are trying to make us go down, our basic buoyancy is making us go up. Also, if you had insufficient drive, so it's all going to be based upon how much buoyancy you have. You need enough drive and downward planes to go against your buoyancy. You can see if I don't give it enough thrust, immediately you're going to have something more than this, but this is just to demonstrate. You can see even with the dive planes, it cannot get you down to the -20 depth we want to go to. So okay, this is your basic design, and if for whatever reason this could be relevant if you have built a vehicle using a lot of wood, for instance, which has buoyancy, so you got to force it down. But this is, I've seen this works. I mean, this will work as a basic submarine to control your depth. Okay, other ways of controlling your depth. Let's we're gonna leave the propellers on a low rate. The other way is using more propellers. We can have propellers to act as lifting and diving. So if we go underwater, and we'll use a square propeller, now because they will go in reverse, what we can do is now you have a choice. I would still always have your dive planes and trim planes, but for purposes here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace these. If for some reason on your design you didn't want any external hydrofoils, what you could then do is get some propellers. Here we go, at the front and the rear. So what I have set up here is we've got 6 propellers in the end. Reduce the power down a little bit, but some of them are in reverse mode. So we've got some in the center. Now these are set up just to be up and down, and they're about level with my center of mass, slightly off but close enough. And they're just purely set for up and down on the on the hover. The ones at the front are set up a little bit to be up and down, and also a pitch up. So basically when they power in normal mode, they would pitch up, so we give them a little bit of power there. They also have got the up and down as well, and the rear ones are doing the job of the trim blades by just saying pitch down. So when they power, they do pitch down. Now we could give these a little bit of hover as well, so if I want to be able to go down, let's give them a 0.25 as well. 0.25. Now one advantage of this system, advantages, disadvantages, even under this low power of the thrusters, of the main propulsion, we are going up and down. So it's holding this depth. If I set this to 0, we would still hold our position. Also, you know, we can very quickly change depth, because these propellers are very powerful. So if I set this down to a -2, which is almost a surface control, you'll see the propellers will very quickly put you up onto the surface. And if I now go down to -50, we should be taken down relatively quickly by these propellers once they get into reverse mode. Taking a little while, they're having a bit of a struggle. Not as quick as I would like. They are going down, but they are having to fight. Now you could make them more powerful, and you could put PIDs in to stabilize the porpoising motion of the vehicle. So that's option number 2, and I see a few ships use the as I say, these are quite good. You can also put ones on the side and basically make it strafe left and right, so then it becomes almost like a drone underwater. So instead of setting those to be yaw, you could set that to strafe. That would be strafe left, and this one would be strafe right. And you now would have full 6-axis of motion if you wanted to use that. So you could actually use that 6-axis AI instead if you wanted to. So yeah, using propellers. Downside, they use power. If they get damaged, you do tend to find your ship can get quite wildly out of control, as some are powered, some parts, corners are powered, and some parts are not. But it's very handy in small submarines where you haven't got much room to do what will be my next option. So yeah, I think this is a good second choice for slightly more advanced than just having forced down with the dive planes. I suppose other side, this isn't so much of a problem in this. If they do get damaged for any reason, or you lose power on your ship, you will naturally, because this is a floating ship, you will surface, which means you can stop it doing the hitting a certain point and sinking. It will automatically surface for you. Right, my other option, and this is my preferred way of doing these ships, is first of all what I do is I do have a slight dive plane which I set at my ideal water height, sea level, what I'm going to have as sea level, and they're set up with hover up, pitch down, hover up, pitch 0, yep, they're all set correctly, and I won't have them too large, just enough just to make sure it pitches in the right direction. Or what I might do is reduce the power of them, but we'll use those for the moment. And then at the rear I'll have my trim planes, which I like to keep low in the water, and we'll have a few more than we have at the front. So it's pitch down. Yep, that's correct. Just make sure the other side is also correct. Pitch down. So that would give us, as we've already discovered, that will give us some control, but it won't, hasn't got enough power on its own, because, oops, we haven't spread to a neighbour there. Lucky I checked that. There we go. Doesn't fully control, and also doesn't control roll, although we could put roll on those. Mine, the way that proper subs work is they have trim tanks and they have ballast tanks. So we're going to go through that process, and they fill various areas with air to make them dive or surface. So what we're going to do is we're going to set those up and use some control blocks to control some of the overall diving and surfacing, and also control use air pumps to control when we want to go up and down. So first thing I tend to do is I build out from the ship a little bit to give myself an area which is going to be my main ballast tanks. So something very simple like this. So I've made a little air pocket either side of my main area, and I'll put an air pump in each side, and this air pump will have hover, so it's going to set to be pump up, and we're going to give it about a 90% and also control the roll. So this one would be roll left 0.1. So that's going to be its main factor. You can already see it's affecting the roll of the ship. And we're going to pace, but this one's going to be roll right. So you'll notice that, here we go, it will adjust the roll of the ship to basically match and keep it level, which is good. Now what we're also going to do is inside this air pump we're going to have also set to deal with the flow, but what we might just do is set this at a very low figure, resting pump of 0.1. So that's going to allow us to, we're going down, which is quite good because our buoyancy level, we basically made ourselves very sinky rather than very floaty. So there we go, we are now going down because of the ballast tanks. And what we would also do is at the front, I'll just make something up about here. So what I have made is a little air pocket at the rear with an air pump, and this we are going to use, we'll set it at 0 by default. We're going to use this again as a pitch. So on this we're going to have pitch up, say 90, and hover up 0.1. So actually, we can put that to 0. Let's put that to 0 and pitch up. There we go. So basically this is now acting almost like dive planes, and we do the same on the front. Now because it can't do a negative, you need to set 2 of these up at each end. Now even if I now take off these, all of these dive planes and hydroplanes, let's see what we end up happening. It's that's pitch up. Oh, I need the front ones to be pitched down. Bear with me. That one's pitch up. Yeah, I put the rear one wrong. Let me just get that rear one sorted. Pitch down. Pitch down. So just after a little correction, the rear one is set to pitch down, so when it pumps air in, it'll point the nose down, and the front one is set to pitch up. When it puts air in, it'll pitch up, and as you can see, that's holding relatively nicely actually. It's slightly sinky. So what we can do is just adjust this central air pump to be give this a little bit more positive scale. There we go. And we should shortly settle at our 15 meters, just using air pumps. So again, this is another good technique for being able to hold. There's no power involved in this. It doesn't rely on the motors giving you any motive force, and it will hold you level and at a depth that you require. And if we do want to surface, all we have to do is set our adjustment up to go to -2. We just set a periscope depth. Let's say we had a periscope depth of -5, and we should see it starting to rise. There we go. Now it may not be rising as fast as using some of the other systems, so this is where obviously the is mix and matching. So like I had taken off the hydrofoils, but I would most probably personally, and in my I combine these, so I will have my trim controls, and I'll also have the dive as well. But the good bit is now is if I get any damage to my hydrofoils, it won't affect the ballast tanks. Will take over and it will start controlling the pitch and roll and everything using the air tanks. So there we're keeping a nice little just below sort of periscope depth. Final bit then is how do I control my depth? Once we've got, let's say, this situation, which is my basic layout which I would use, and this adjustment here, so if we just make it up to -3, is it -3 just going to put us slightly at the, there we go, nice little sort of just sticking your nose out of the water. Or we can set it to surface. Now obviously you don't want to be out doing this manually. If you're controlling the vessel, then obviously you've got your controls, but we are setting this up for the AI to control it. So let's put it at 2 so it goes to full surface. There we go. So that's its maximum surface rate, and we should find that our pump inside is actually at quite a high 45%, which is actually about right, yep, for what we'd set. What I now do is get some control block and set quite simply, that's why you'll see on some of my ships I have lots and lots of control blocks for different situations. Let me just place, I only need one at the moment. So what you'll do is you'll set your behavior. So one could be, let's say there is no enemy in whatever range you want. Under your target action, you set mainframe, minimum altitude over water to be what we are at, surface 2. So that would mean it would go to this surface level. Then what you would do is change this to say, okay, enemy has been spotted, and all you'd have to do is invert that and have your new minimum height be, say, let's say we want it at -50. Test that, and our ship should start now diving to -50. It will take a little while because we do not have much speed here. I'm going to give myself a little bit more speed. Just put this up to 1 because we've proven that it works without having this high, but let's just put that to 1 anyway. There we go. So we've got a slight nose down attitude. Our pitch is at a -2. So on here, depending on how much pitch you want as a maximum, you could decrease the effect of this if you want. Let's put this down to 70.7. And we're going, it will allow us to go a little bit more minus. We're already at the depth. Okay, so you can adjust those. So that's given us those, and obviously you could go further if you haven't detected or certain ranges. I've even done things though, like if I detect a torpedo within a certain range, then I will crash dive to maximum depth. Now I'll just show you one thing. I'm just set that to -125. So if I saw a missile or a torpedo, crash dive as quick as possible to maximum depth. So we're making our way down. We've got, because I reduced the trim on the rear, we've got a nice -4 degrees. These are stopping it. If you don't have these trim blades on the back, basically, as we saw earlier, your ship can be ended up pointing straight down. I've even had submarines with too much control do loops. Now, one problem of the ship system is you'll notice we've stopped at 100 meters, and that is because under the AI, the maximum, because we are using this figure here, this adjustments panel to control our depth, our minimum depth is the max altitude actually of -100. It just will not let us go below that particular height, which is annoying. You can get lower if you use some of the other maneuver systems and change the height instead of there, but I find this one -100 is enough in most cases, unless you're doing a ship which is floats as well as flies, or is a ship submarine. There's no need to have, sorry, I should say airplane submarine, which I have done. There's no need to go more than 100. Yes, it would be slightly more effective in avoiding incoming cram shells and other shells, but torpedoes will still find you. So I work with that. I will look at designing a sub later on which can go down a lot deeper by using a different system of control, and we'll look at that. But I think that for most people this is perfectly advanced enough control system for controlling your subs. So that's it for the moment on this one, on controls. As I say, this is like a beginner to medium level without getting too fancy, sort of historical, how subs do control themselves, with a few limitations such as the problem on the AI of having this limitation of -100. Otherwise though, that is basically a working submarine, as simple as that. Other pros and cons I will say of the three systems. The first system uses less blocks. You don't need to make the ship specifically neutrally buoyant, particularly heavy. You can make it out of wood. It's all a matter of how much power you're using to how much downforce you've got on your dive planes. Minus side of that first version is If you lose power at the rear or your dive planes, your sub will very easily go out of control. So that's a downside of it. Option number 2, using the propellers to make you go up and down. Very good system. With strafe controls, good positive is it can make you dive very quickly. It can also allow you to strafe in 6 degrees of movement. Very good if you want to make a submarine which is more droney, an underwater drone style, rather than necessarily being a more traditional submarine ship style. It does take power. If you lose power, you lose power to your thrusters, and your system can lose control. Very often, if you lose one corner, you can find that the other corners can't quite, it depends on how you set it up, sometimes can't adapt, and you'll start rolling and pitching uncontrollably unless you set everything up to be able to counter each other. Not too difficult with the current system of being able to adjust the propeller using all of these different axes, but it's potential. I do like it. As I say, it does take power, and for me it's not necessarily historically accurate. It's not inspired by history. Third one, I should say, on the other con on the other one, they do cost resources more than the first one, but not as much as the second one. This particular version, with the ballast tanks all over the place as well as dive planes, gives you first one is you've got very good control of all the different aspects. It is in keeping with modern submarines. It's not particularly plus or minus. It can't strafe sideways, so that's a minus. It costs more materials because you do have to create the air sections, like a main air tanks on the side and ones at the back and front. Plus point is, using that extra materials, I have effectively given myself extra armour, so it has armoured the side up a little bit. Minus side, as always we'll have the minuses. If this air tank should get blown for some reason, then oops, that's not the way I want to do that. Let me just take off my mirror line. So if one side should get damaged, then you're gonna lose all ballast control on one side. That, yes, could be mitigated by sectioning this off. So don't just have one big, but have it, as real submarines do, they have it in 3 segments. So although one might get damaged, it's unlikely you're going to take all 3 segments out, 4, 5, however many you might have. So that's a downside of that one. It's also, it's not as fast as to control diving, etc., as the second option with the propellers, but generally it's better control than the first one. That's it for now. That's my view on these 3. Yes, there are more. This is the control systems I like to use. As I said, I will do one with possibly using an aircraft control, because with the aircraft control you can get more height differential, so you can go to much deeper depths, but it is more advanced, and you do have to use the more advanced types of controls to make sure that you can go down to the right depths. But we'll look at that, as I say, in a more modernized submarine later. Any thoughts? Please leave comments down below. Anything you think I've missed that I haven't covered previously in this? Remember, this is just about controls. Next one I'll look at is quickly look at propulsion, different possible propulsion schemes for submarines. We just go through some of the various options, and some of them are quite interesting. And then the third video will be building a historical sub for the campaign. Until next time, as always, keep playing the game and have fun.